Hey guys, my name is Colson Rosa, and welcome back to Seraphim Stories. Today, I want to be reviewing one of my favorite books in the Narnia series, which is Prince Caspian. And I'm so excited to dive right into this book today, and I just want to tell you about how many different lessons it's taught me about being an author and the craft of storytelling. This story is not only unique, but memorable even now, so long after it was written. And I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that some of these characters that Lewis created are just ingrained within pop culture and they're always going to remain within it. But specifically focusing on Prince Caspian as a story, there is a minor spoiler warning, but I'm mostly going to be talking overall big picture about what happens in this book and some of the tricks and techniques Lewis employs in order to improve this narrative that's been building up from books like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And the first thing that I think is really important to notice with the Prince Caspian tale that it tells is that it's a changed world. This world so intricately built up that is Narnia gets changed drastically over the course of this book from where it once was. And this is a real way Lewis is able to build tension in his story, because at the end of the previous novel it might seem like the evil was defeated and there's not much more that could go wrong. He now has to introduce not only a new enemy, a new antagonist, but he also has to introduce a world itself that is still precious to us. We still have grown to love and admire all of the craft and detail Lewis has put into Narnia. But as time has passed differently in this world, we see that so much of Narnia has completely changed when the kids return. The Pevensies find it in ruins and shambles, and trying to piece together all of the Telmarine attacks that have just worn them down, and the loss of so much of the mystery and intrigue of this world, and the creatures fighting to even survive anymore when they've been hunted to near extinction. What is excellent though about how he does this is it's not only just depressing or doom and gloom type scenario. It's not an apocalypse for Narnia, but there are glimmers of the old Narnia that survive, that shine through, that want to remain. And that hope is something that the reader clings to as the story progresses. The next thing Lewis does really well is he introduces new characters. There are often new characters introduced in all of these books and throughout series from many different authors. But these characters that so easily could have been secondary are actually iconic in their own right and are going to last through pretty much the rest of the Narnia series. Characters like Caspian and Reepicheep are introduced seamlessly. They flow right into the story, and they are quickly, through very few pages, able to be shown their true personality, their true quirks and intricacies. And I think Reepicheep's a great example of that. Just his bold, fearless nature and character of honor, almost like a samurai, which is so unique for a little mouse to be possessing this characteristic. And I think one of the reasons Lewis is then able to introduce these characters so well and make them stand out just as much as the Pevensies is that the fact that there's two interwoven stories. Both are integral to the plot, and they have deep insights to offer about the entire narrative. King Miraz, why he's so evil, what he's been working and doing as leader of the Telmarines, why Caspian's life is in such danger, how Narnia got to this place where it's falling apart, and what's going to bring it back together. Learning about Caspian makes the Pevensey siblings more understanding and able to rescue him, and learning about his army and the struggles that they have to face make it so much more meaningful when that victory finally comes. The climax then for both of these stories is when they are unified and have to place their joint trust in Aslan. That fact then ties them all together because they come to realize that they can't do this on their own, of course, but also that the storylines both of them have been working through aren't completely separate. they were able to help each other, sometimes in ways they didn't even know, in order to jointly fight against the Telmarines and try to restore Narnia. And this is a technique that can easily be done incorrectly if you're trying to focus so much on one storyline that the other one falls through the cracks and kind of feels unnecessary, or that one of the two storylines is so much weaker than the other. You have to have two jointly built strong storylines that both can kind of stand up on their own. Another thing that's really interesting about this book, and I wish I could talk so much more about it, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to be brief and not go into too many spoilers. But the entire theme of parting ways. This theme is very interesting when it comes to Caspian parting from his castle that's rightly his, but he knows he needs to leave it, and Dr. Cornelius. The parting ways of the old Narnia, how it used to be, to now this new Narnia that has progressed so long in time that needs to be saved. But there's other ways it happens as well. Many characters find a sort of ending in this book, for one way or another, at least an ending for most of the Narnia franchise. Death for Miraz comes from the hands of his own men, and this is perhaps the most shocking way for him to go, because it's just gut-wrenching and gripping that the Narnians didn't get the honor of doing it, but at the same point in time, his own men betrayed him, blamed it all on the Narnians, and cast the whole situation of the battlefield back into tension and war and everything they were trying to avoid by doing single combat. And it just goes to show that these Telmarines are all self-focused, and they're not doing it for the good of Narnia, the good of the realm. At the same point in time, it's equally saddening to know that Peter and Susan's time in this world comes to an end. They have grown older. Aslan has taught them what he needs to have taught them. And as we will see later on in the Narnia books, they're presented with a choice. Peter and Susan end up making very different choices in life about the respect due to Aslan and the type of lives they want to be living. But at the same point in time, this parting ways isn't necessarily sad alone. It's meant to get us thinking about the choices they'll have to make in their lives in the real world now. And also just the progression of them as characters, knowing how much they've gone through, and the fact that we won't get to see them any longer, at least for quite some time. But there's a different sort of parting ways when it comes to Lucy and Edmund, who get that hope and intrigue of, if they weren't summoned to talk to Aslan, that their time was over, they very well may be coming back to Narnia someday. And that's exactly what we see happen. And they, being so much younger, then have to carry the mantle and pick up the responsibility of being leaders, acting like true civil servants, kings and queens like they ought to in this world. And it's just so fascinating to see them rise to that occasion. And overall, I just want to mention then about Prince Caspian that not only has the world changed and the characters are unique, but I think with these storylines, it balances all of the aspects we've been talking about on this channel so well. Even though there's two interwoven stories, neither is bogged down too heavily by description, but uses it practically and purposefully to set both scenarios each other are fighting. Right when you get to the point where you feel like you wanted to hear more about the other storyline, Lewis will naturally switch over and give you that perspective the Pevensies are facing, or Caspian and his men are facing. And you get to see a combined balance of deep character development for the entire cast, especially for Caspian, especially knowing the burden placed upon him and the lives that he could be saving. The Narnia he could be returning to what has been written in the history books, and he wants to see it return to that. But you also then get to see just a combination of those descriptions, those character moments, building into the type of action scenes that you long for in these type of books, that can be riveting for young kids, but even can be exciting for the older generation that may return to this book series. That's what Lewis does so well. These books can't be so neatly defined in the box of children's books or maybe more adult books, because they're so innocent and wholesome, but at the same point in time offer deep truths that when you really sink your teeth into these books, you find more and more layers the farther you go down and the more you consider them. So I hope that's exactly what you do with these books, especially with Prince Caspian and so many of the wonderful characters and creatures that are introduced. Everything from the centaurs to then the living trees who come to fight for Aslan's side. So many just fascinating elements of fantasy woven into a storyline that's very personable, especially with what Caspian has to go through and the struggles that he faces. So I hope you guys read this book and fall in love with Lewis and the fantasy writings that he has, but also just come to consider how using literature in the books that you read then informs you as an author of how to improve your own stories that you tell. So if you guys have any questions, please leave them below. Consider liking this video and subscribing if you want to hear more about the world of creative writing and fiction. And I'm so excited to get to present to you guys some new videos I have coming up in the future. So thank you guys, and I hope you have a great day. God bless.